Hi everyone. Yesterday we only read part of the interlude and we read up to the part where the bard pulled a letter out of his pocket, but we didn't read that letter, so we're going to finish the interlude today, starting with the letter. My name is Orna. I am old now, a long tooth as they say here in Hulstland, but once I was a young rabbit, born in a little warren on the northern coast of Enderby called Sandywell, a simple place full of simple grey-furred fisher rabbits. That warren has another name now, and the rabbits don't fish anymore. Now they are called the Gorm, and they do things that set your fur shivering and your ears shaking. But it wasn't always that way. That's why I want my story written down, so that others can learn from it, so that the same thing doesn't happen to any other warren like it did ours. When I was a little doe, we had a happy, carefree life. We lived right on the edge of the sandiest beach you ever saw, and we used to spend hours running around the dunes and splashing in the rock pools. When I think back, all I remember is the sun in my eyes, sand between my toes, and salt spray on my fur. Happy days. Our chief was a funny little rabbit named Crammer. Crammer the Cautious, he was known as, for he never made a decision without going over it 100 times or more. He was known for changing his mind, getting muddled, and generally putting everything in a pickle. I remember hearing my father and his friends moaning about him many an evening in the Longburrow, but nobody dared to do anything about it. He had the magic helmet of the goddess, you see, a great metal thing with copper horns. On him it looked like an upside-down cauldron, but it protected him from any spear or blade, and he never took it off. It did have a special name, but we just called it the Copper Pot. Sandywell wasn't the most exciting warren to live in, but it was safe and warm, and we were happy, at least until that terrible day. I don't like to speak of it, but I know I must. Crammer, our chief, had finally decided that we needed to dig a new Longburrow. The sandy soil of the warren tended to crumble and the older parts were wearing away. It was a big job and all the rabbits had to help, even as young kittens. We carried baskets of soil out for the diggers and brought them drinks and food. The soil was soft and loamy, and the new burrow fast appeared. Then after a few days of digging, a cry went out that something had been found. I remember dashing down there with my friends, expecting to find pots of gold or fairy treasure. Instead, there was something else. It makes my fur crawl to think of it, even now after all this time. The thing, it was there, jutting up out of the ground like a great rotten fang. It was dark metal, iron of some sort perhaps. We had seen lumps of iron before. We knew it was metal the goddess hated, and that no rabbit could work it. But they had been tiny lumps the size of your paw. This thing was huge, as tall as the biggest rabbit in the warren, and then some. And there was something about it. It didn't feel right. You could sense it pulsing and grinding inside itself as if it were angry or full of something nasty. It was jagged and rough, but under the surface you could see things. Things that seemed to twitch and move. Spikes and horns here, a tentacle there, even an eye or a mouth. We all knew it was evil. That was very clear. Nobody wanted to go near the new Longburrow after that. Our priestess sealed off the tunnel with magic charms, and we all tried to pretend it hadn't happened. But none of us slept easy after that night. And then the noises started. Deep in the dead of night, you could hear them. Voices mostly, some belonging to rabbits, some belonging to something else. Sometimes there was laughing and chanting too, although not in any language we had heard before. And then the hammering started. From that day, Crammer, our chieftain, was almost never seen in the daylight. Every night, when the warren was asleep, he went down there with his soldiers to be near that thing. It changed them, told them how to take the iron and hammer it and shape it, whispered dark secrets and forbidden promises in their ears. That evil shard of metal took over our chief. It did. That evil shard of metal took our chief. What could it have offered him? Power? Strength? Riches? Maybe it took away all his caution and gave him something else instead. I know this for sure, though all the time he was forging it into something else, it was forging him as well. The bard stopped a moment. He could see the little rabbits enraptured, the older rabbits too. The entire Longburrow was now hanging on his every word. He cleared his throat and continued. A week or so later, the night hammering stopped. The next day, Crammer showed himself. It was a Mers Day feast, as I remember, the day we honoured our goddess of the sea. We were all sat in the long burrow, about to start a dinner of grilled mackerel and crab cakes, the last fish I ever ate. Crammer walked into the long burrow with his soldiers, and every rabbit almost screamed. The oversized copper pot wasn't on his head anymore. In its place was a different helmet, an iron one, all twisted and spiked. It had 2 horns, like a mockery of the goddess's helm, but they were mismatched and jagged things. He walked taller and broader than before. This was not Crammer the Cautious. This was a part of that evil iron thing, walking around in rabbit form. He spoke to us then in a grating, scraping voice that none of us recognised. In the years since, I've tried to remember what he said, but the truth is, I wasn't really listening. All I could do at the time was stare at that iron war helm of his, but mostly his eyes, his and all his soldiers. They weren't rabbit eyes anymore, you see. They were red, like rusted iron or dried blood. Some rabbits stood up and protested. Our priestesses one, my uncle another. The soldiers grabbed them and took them away, deep into the warren. We never saw them again. That night, my family and I, and a lot of others besides, all crept out of Sandywell and ran. We ran for our lives, and we didn't stop until we had forests, rivers and mountains in between that place and us. If you're listening to this and you want to stay safe and free, you'll do the same. And wherever you end up, take this one piece of advice from an old rabbit who's kept her skin long enough to know. Keep your warren safe, keep your warren warm, but don't dig too deep. The bard folds up the old leather parchment and tucks it inside his belt pouch. There is silence for a little while afterwards, as the little rabbits imagine horrid things buried in the earth beneath their bottoms. But buried is perhaps better than a wandering witch putting curses on you and turning you into a monster. The bard looks at the little girl rabbit and sees she is slightly less terrified, which will have to do. The silence doesn't last for long, of course. Was the copper pot a magic weapon like Starclaw then? Did the chief turn into Scrammershank? A little speckled rabbit looks up at the bard with huge saucer eyes glinting in the firelight. Her friends all nod, wanting to find out too. Even more questions? You are an inquisitive one indeed, aren't you? The bard reaches down and tweaks one of her floppy ears. Way back, before memories even began, the goddess herself gave each of the 12 rabbit tribes a magic treasure. Sandywell had the copper pot, and Starclaw was the prize of Mumbury Warren, who were once the greatest tribe of all. Did we get a gift? Where's our magic weapon? The bard laughs at this and winks over at Chief Hubert, who is rolling his eyes as he sips at a bowl of buttery turnip soup. Thornwood Warren is too new for that. It hasn't been here much more than 60 years. In fact, at that time of my story, it was little more than a scrape in the ground, which is why the Gorm never bothered with it. Where are the magic gifts now, then? Who's got the dagger? Did the Gorm destroy the helmet? What other magic things were there? Yes, called the other rabbits. Where is the dagger now? What happened to it? What happened? Bang! The bard brings his wooden flagon down on the tabletop, making all the little rabbits jump. They squeak and shiver for a bit until he fixes them all with his best glare. Then they are completely silent. When all that can be heard is the crackle of a fire and the slurping of Chief Hubert's soup, he speaks again. I do believe we had a deal, didn't we? They were running from the Gorm, one rabbit called out. Podkin had just toppled a tree onto the riders, yells another. They were squished like raspberry jam. There was blood everywhere, and eyeballs and things. All right, says the bard. That's quite enough gory detail. Now let me carry on where I left off. And we will start chapter 5 tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.